And I'm Scott Taylor. I'm with InfoCommerce Group. I'm delighted to have you all here. We're here to talk about the Models of Excellence winners that were applauded today. Here they are again. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. I have Bruce Brownson of KnowHo, Kreg of SpinGo, John Sturino of Equilar, and Daniel Zadoff of Nutritionix. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. As well, what we're going to do is kind of, because they're new to the InfoCommerce space, we're going to have each of them come up and tell their story with some slides, 5-10 minutes or so. Then we will work on some questions, so have some questions handy, because we will be going around the room, making sure everybody asks questions. So we'll start here in classic alphabetical order with Bruce, please. Are we good? The clicker? Oh, there we go. Here we go. Thank you, sir. You're welcome. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Great. So I'm Bruce with KnowWho. This is my 22nd trip to the old National Directory Publishers Conference, which is now InfoCommerce. So I've been at this event for a long time. My first talk here was how to maximize your revenue by selling your data on 5 1/4-inch floppies. So we've come a long way since then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the start of this product. KnowWho is a database company. I keep telling my sales guys that every Thursday at our sales and marketing meeting. We are a database company. We sell data. Our data includes information on 130 to 140,000 elected officials. So we had a lot of fun last Tuesday during the elections, and we're busy people keeping all that up to date. So our database contains information, contact information, social media information, background and biographical information on all the federal, state, and local government officials in the United States. We sell that data to a lot of software companies, a lot of people who are building advocacy websites, and people who are trying to impact or educate those elected officials in their issues or in the way they do things. So we spend about $2 million a year on data. We employ scraping tools and some technology like Connotate to alert us to when changes have taken place, but none of that data actually makes its way into the database. It's all put in the database by a fresh set of eyes, people who've been trained, 34 editors we have on staff. We're always looking for creative ways to repurpose our data and generate more revenue. I'm sure that's something everybody here is interested in as well. So the original concept for this Salesforce product actually came out of an Outlook experience. So the idea was, we've got these lobbyists and these people who are trying to communicate with members of Congress. What would happen if we could put all of our data, all the members of Congress and all 13,000 staffers and all the committee information, what would happen if we could put that data in the same repository where they kept all of their important mission-critical contact data? And we came up with a very clever Outlook product where we put Congress in Outlook, and that was very well received by the marketplace. It gave them mobile capability because it put it on their mobile device. Gradually, that kind of waned, and Outlook has kind of waned, so we came up with the idea of putting this into Salesforce. Actually, as most great ideas are, it was a customer's idea. They were going to license our data and put it into a repository, which typically would have been Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server. They told me they were going to put it in Salesforce, and I begged them to give me 15 minutes to come down and talk them out of it. And after sitting through a 15-minute demo of what they built, we decided that that was something that we probably wanted to do moving forward. So what we basically have done is tried to maximize the Salesforce experience, both in terms of the way Salesforce is architected and also in the fact that we're coming out of a database back end. So in essence, the standard Salesforce record for actually the Congresswoman who represents the hotel that we're in right now gives you all of the fundamental information that you need in a very Salesforce-looking user interface. So I don't know how many of you, let's raise your hands. How many folks are familiar with or have worked with Salesforce? Wow. It is taking over the world. So in essence, what this basically does for our clients is it puts all of the critical information about this Congresswoman in one place. And it's architected in the Salesforce model where you've got an account and then you've got contacts underneath that account. So in this case, the congressional district is the account and the member of Congress and all of her staff would be contacts underneath that account. So puts right at your fingertips all of the information that you need. I'm going to scroll through some of this. I'm not going to try and show you all of it. You can see the web applets in the middle. We're going to touch on those in a minute, but down below you can see all of her staff people. So all of this information is not, and I don't have a problem with APIs. I think APIs are wonderful, but that's not the way we've approached this. We are actually pushing our data into their Salesforce instance. So what you are seeing are native contacts and native accounts sitting in their Salesforce instance that they can then interact with, and that's part of the license agreement. So our data lives inside their Salesforce instance. So this would allow them to create reports or create mailings or be able to do external launches of email blasts or analytics, any of that kind of stuff. So to kind of extend the relationship, what we've done is those web applets are actually services that are hosted off of a web service that we have. So for instance, if you clicked on that globe on the upper right-hand side, you'd be able to paint a map of her congressional district, and you'd be able to look at all the adjoining districts and all the other information. Now, those of you who've dealt with Salesforce know that they kill you on storage costs. So this is not data that's inside Salesforce. This is actually a web service outside Salesforce, so none of the maps, none of the storage, none of that stuff impacts your storage requirements. So again, this is more of the same kind of Salesforce information. We're a database company, as I said. One of the things that we offer is former staffers. So this is critical to our customers. If you're used to dealing with somebody over the last 2 years on her staff, and you have tied meetings and calendar events and white papers and communications back and forth with that office, and then all of a sudden that person leaves, the worst thing you could possibly do is take that person out of the database. So what we do is we move them out of current staff down into former staff, thus giving our clients an opportunity to continue their linkage to all of those communications and all of that past history. And you can see there are a couple of folks who are still on the Hill, and it will identify where they are on the Hill. If we had a subscription to our federal product or a subscription to our government affairs product, it would show which lobbying firm they went to or which other organization that they moved to. So the important part about this is you look at the bottom of the record, for those of you that are familiar with Salesforce, that's the standard Salesforce objects. I want to assign tasks. I want to keep track of all of my activities. So all of our information is in a page view that sits on top of the standard Salesforce accounts and contacts. So everything you're used to doing in Salesforce, you can do with this record and build your relationships with this office. Moving forward, so with innovation and with challenges come great opportunities for new directories. So we also have launched, since our application for this honor, we've launched the Federal Executive KnowWho for Salesforce, tracks the top 40,000 people in the Obama administration, the White House departments, and the independent agencies. We have State KnowWho for Salesforce, which tracks the executive offices of all the states, governors, lieutenant governors, and also all 7,000 state legislators. And then we have Local KnowWho for Salesforce. That would be all 3,000 counties in the United States and 3,600 municipalities. We cover every municipality with a population over 10,000. So if you were looking for county commissioners or county executives or mayors, that would be the data set that you would use. We're now looking at moving into some new opportunities. So we're looking at government affairs contacts. So if you needed access to the lobbyists or the trade associations or the trade unions or the think tanks or the interest groups, that would be available in Salesforce. Obviously some challenges there trying to figure out how to categorize them by subject, so that if you're in a transportation cycle or if you're in a health vertical, you're only going to look at the ones that are relevant to you. Media data. We get a lot of people asking for media data. We have media data at KnowWho, but it's basically letters to the editor. So typically somebody in our line of work would want to send a letter to their congressman and then would want to copy the local newspaper in hopes of getting it published and focusing more attention on that issue. What I'm looking for would be the ability to be able to identify reporters, identify editors, identify bloggers by beat code and get messages out them and get them interested in issues that my clients are interested in that they want to amplify. So, and that's on the directory side. Kind of the most exciting part of this, and this is where the data company statement kind of gets blurred a little bit. We have built a number of apps. So if you think of the congressional Congress KnowWho for Salesforce as being kind of the foundation, on that we attach a number of apps. So we have an app that allows people to do lobbying tracking all of their lobbying activities and creating the reports at the end of the quarter that they need to file for lobbying activity. We have a List Wizard app which allows them to simply get around. Those of you who dealt with Salesforce know how tough some of the reporting and some of the campaign building can be. The List Wizard allows you to say, I want to send a message to all of the legislative directors who work for Republican congressmen who deal with healthcare, and create campaigns and direct your emails that way. Zip to District Matching is an app that allows a company, like we have a company that has 6 million members. It allows them to run that against our zip matching and determine the congressional district for each of those 6 million people. So if they want to mobilize people in a certain congressional district against a congressman who's keeping them from passing a piece of legislation, they can mobilize them that way. The Zip to District Matching app runs on their data, on their contacts and their accounts inside Salesforce, and is a permanent part of the data. So it's something, it's not an API. We actually go in and add an object that says, for this person, this is their congressional district, state senate district, state house district. And then the Map Wizard is something that's relatively new, and I'm pretty pleased with this. So what the Map Wizard basically does is takes that mapping functionality that I showed you earlier, but allows our client to go in and determine on the map where their contacts and their accounts are. So a perfect example in our world would be the congressman's going to have a town hall meeting, right? So we want to take a look at those 6 million people, and 1,500 of them are in his congressional district. But then we only want really to invite the people to the town hall meeting who've engaged in advocacy with us in the past, who know how to present the issue without being volatile or hostile. So this allows us to filter that list down to maybe the 25 or 30 people that we want, and put them in a campaign in Salesforce and send it out. We have a number of big box stores that are using this to help them determine who the legislators are who have to approve zoning for a store that they want to put outside of Miami Beach. And then after the store is approved, they draw a 50-mile radius and extract all the legislators and invite them down for the grand opening, and hand them what we call a district impact report, which says this store is bringing this many jobs and this many opportunities. So the apps are an important part about what we add on, and a constant feedback from our customers as to additional opportunities for us in terms of extending our revenue. So that's an exciting trend for us. I should also say, because we're totally crazy, we do exactly the same thing in dynamic CRM. So we're covering both of the major markets for CRM. We see integrating content into the CRM world and into the cloud as an important part of our growth. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, nice job. Very cool. Now Kreg is going to talk to us about SpinGo.
Good afternoon. So it's nice to be here with you and to learn more about all these different business models and opportunities around good content and good data marketing. SpinGo is an event engine, or also known as a local entertainment platform. And what we do is we take all the information that's across the internet relevant to events, and we aggregate that into a massive database. We typically don't scrape. What we do is we actually ingest from other trusted providers, whether it be a ticketing site or a public submission from a major news site or existing listings that are out there from other sources, and we review them and verify them and cross-check them. And we license that content back to over 1,100 different media websites and app developers. Altogether, there's 5,000 widgets and apps across the internet that we power now, and the aggregate trends above 100 million monthly users when you look at all the different outlets we have. Here's just a few examples of New York Daily News, the Daily Herald, UT San Diego, Boston.com that use our product. And the reality is event content was really difficult to manage previous to SpinGo. Here's an example of how the product works on an iPad. And the way we made event content manageable is by looking at the differences between transient and persistent data content. The two have to work together, but we categorize, when we build our database, we categorize them separately. And we realize that there's a lot of things that are actually very permanent about events, very persistent content elements. The venue doesn't change very often. The performer's bio doesn't change very often. Their images, their video links, all of that information actually stays fairly consistent and persistent. And so what we do is we look at the things that do change, and we just make new associations between existing pieces that are already in our database and reuse as much of that content as we can. And that allows us to process more than 150,000 events every month. And so, again, as we were discussing earlier, you have 100,000 different content sources that come into our system. We verify that. We add rich media and other local intelligence factors, some social data, and we license that out to media groups, the venues and promoters themselves, retailers and suppliers, and app developers. And this is just a glimpse of some of the content that we can provide. So this is an example of a themed run, like a 5K. We've kind of gone explosive lately. If you followed any of the hype around Tough Mudder or the Color Run or any of those, a lot of those are some of our bigger festival clients. And we did a promotion for one of them, and we were able to give them a report that looked like this, and they could hover over each one of those circles and see which media property drove that traffic, how many impressions they got, how many engagements, how many ticket sales. All the information around that event was able to be summarized in one dashboard, which is a huge improvement over where they were a couple years ago. If they had to call each and every media property across the country and try to figure out, well, how did we do it in Los Angeles versus Chicago versus New York, we give them one collaborated and compiled database.
So is that that's a single report for one client?
Yes.
For all the events that they're related to?
For one event promoter, for a series of events.
Oh, cool.
So this is just a single event as it went across the country. And there's a quote from Chad Follett, who's a contributor for Forbes. And he said the goal is to deliver the right content to the correct person at the best time on the channel they prefer. And that is really a statement that we've taken to heart. And our goal is to really retarget the event attendees using the right channels with the most relevant content that we possibly can. And then we move into another phase of our business, and this is really where we see the inflection point for what we're doing. We built out this network of media companies. Now we're working with event promoters, event marketers that want to reach all these attendees at the right time. And we're able to take all that data, and just like we saw on that last slide of the U.S. And how that event trended across the country, we're able to provide a lot of insight to other marketers that want to know, where's the demand going to be? When are there going to be 100,000 runners coming through my town? And we can tell them that information. And there's a lot out there, obviously, that is location-based. A lot of things happening around Google Maps and their APIs that inform a lot of shopper behavior and targeted marketing. There's a lot of things being said about digital persona and understanding people on Facebook and Twitter and what type of interests they have. But I think there's one piece that's missing from most of these equations, and that's when. SpinGo really encompasses the when. We understand the when of local better than anybody else. And that's because we manage all this event content that flows through our system. And not only do we look at it as an instance in time, but we look at it over a trend of time. And if you look at a performer or a venue, we can tell you exactly where the dips and spikes were in a venue's attendance or in a performer's tour. And all those things will help us inform where a new venue should be built in a major metro, or where a new retail store should open, or what about a new grocery store that serves a certain type of product at certain times of the month based off of the draw from the event crowd. And this is all comprised into what we call situational intelligence. And the product we have is called Demand Analytics. And this is a product we built in conjunction with Walmart to help them understand when they should be selling soccer balls, or when they should be selling coolers for the outdoor concerts in the parks and the different things that are coming through town. And we can classify things based off the genre or the category of the event, but we can also help them drill into their own data and juxtapose that with the purchasing behaviors around beverages or around apparel or other things, and help them really position those products. Yes? 5 minutes. Okay. So again, this is what we look at. If you think of this consumer here walking through a metro, they have to think, our products need to think about all of these things. The time, location, conditions, and context. And I believe that search will be displaced by situational intelligence. No longer will we be actively searching on our phones. Instead, our phones will be searching for us and informing us of things we should know and products we should be considering and places we should be before we even know about it. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's great. Now, John from Equilar.
Hi, my slides are not nearly as pretty, so I'm going to wander around so I don't get stuck by the microphone that I'm not using.
You can't cross that.
Can we mark that spot?
Moderator zone only.
I have to, there we go, all right. Now I know where I can walk. So Equilar has actually been around for about 14 years, and they've made a great business out of mining SEC documents for executive compensation data. And over that period of time, in mining all this information about the executives' compensation, they've mined a lot of information about the executives themselves. And we found that, and they brought me in about a year ago, and they said, hey, we have all this data, what else can we do with it? And so what we figured out was, with all of this information, what those executives want to do is they actually want to interact with each other. And I'm going to preempt a question that I always get, and before the end of this, you'll be asking yourself that question: isn't there already LinkedIn? Yes, there is already LinkedIn, but you know what? These people are not using it. We actually, in our data, we've had several thousand people use this. Over half of them do not have a LinkedIn profile at all. Of the half that do, half of those people haven't updated in 3 years. So we actually believe that there's a need in the marketplace, and I'll talk a little bit about the adoption so far, for this place for executives to be able to actually interact with each other and to really go to an event. And really what we saw was, when you're going to an event, it's kind of like we put all of this technology in place for almost everything else, but the networking purpose of an event still is like, you're in a room together, go for it. And there's really no platform that helps the way we would like to. So what is it? It's derived social networks that we're using to help power real social networking. Let me just show you what it is. That's a lot easier. So if you look across the top, it's got all the basics of an event application. It'll show you the agenda, it'll show you where it is, sponsors, and you can even put up materials from your event so that everybody can go and access it. And there are several players doing this right now. Where we are really different is where we drive our home strength advantage is the participants. So what we do is, for an event, when you go there, you'll get a bio and a work history of every single attendee. So about a week in advance, you'll get a message saying, come log in, and it'll tell you basically everybody who's there, as much as we can. We've got photos, bios, titles, got their companies. This is nice, but it doesn't work for every type of event. So earlier when David was talking, and he was talking about events, and I was like, great, and then he said, we do big trade shows, and I'm like, okay, maybe not. Then he came back and he said, but we do a executive only one for specialty foods. And I said, okay, now we're back in the game. This is really meant for people who are public figures, because what we do is we take beyond the SEC documents. It's a great, rich data source, but it's very limited in scope. We actually go out to the websites, and we don't look at LinkedIn, we don't look at Wikipedia, we only go into information that they themselves publish about themselves. And so what we found is, on company websites is a very rich source of data about individuals. Almost always there's a photo, there's a bio. Inside the bio is really a lot of information about their work history, and so we structure that. So being able to see everybody and look at the bio, really helpful. Another thing we do is we actually organize it by all of the companies that the person is associated with. So if you're interested in meeting somebody who's associated with the company, they don't always register under that company. So even if you get a list of everybody and you get where they're from, you may not know that somebody, say, who sits on the board for Coca-Cola is actually there because he registered because he's on the board of Yum Brands. And so you'll see the biography. On the left is the timeline that we've structured, so it's really about, here are all the positions that they've held, as much as we can tell. What we've determined is actually less is more here, so we are definitely erring on the side of being correct. So if we don't know exactly when your start and stop date was, we'll just say past. If we can't validate it, we will just leave it out. The interesting thing about all of this is the question we kept getting asked up front was, well, aren't people gonna, how do people feel about having their profile show up when you show up without having given it to you? And my background is more consumer, and so I that's what I call the cool, creepy line. Right? So you get to the idea is you always want to stay on the cool side of this. And the way we stay away from the creepy side is we source everything. So you'll see the source of the bios down there. If you were to, Curtis has a very long storied career, so he's got a very long timeline. But if you were to go down to the bottom, you would see sources for everything on there, and you can actually click through and see them. This is the app version. It's not a native app. It's HTML5. But the app version really focuses in on making it really easy to find people. You can go through and create your own short list. These are people I'm interested in meeting, so that you can reference it during the application. And we cross-reference your people's work history. So if you were at the same level, at the same place, at the same time, we say you probably knew each other. And so we'll connect people. We have a graph DB in the background that is working off of a probabilistic model that says these are things that people have in common, and we're going to make a judgment as to whether or not we think that they actually know each other based on that. And so you go in here and you say, oh, okay, I've got somebody in common with this person. I click on it and it tells me who I know in common with that person. So the hardest part about what we're doing here is not actually the scraping component or even the identification of which pages within the website actually carry this information. The hardest part is we're not trying to create, we're trying to create a profile. And so to create a profile, it's not about creating a contact. It's about understanding every time you find that person that it's the same person. So there's Tim Cook, who's CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, who's on the board of Nike, and Tim Cook, who runs a healthcare clinic. Well, two of those three people are actually the same person. So how do you actually figure that out? And that's really where we spend a lot of our time, is on that merge function. Beyond that, how do you keep your data up to date? I'm sure it's probably somebody in this room who said, data is like buying a car. It loses half its value when you drive it off the lot. So, how do we keep this up to date? We actually go back and we re-pull it on a regular basis just to make sure that it's up to date. We also have an advantage because with all of these events, people are telling us. They're telling us more about themselves. We've had 20% of the people go in and actually provide more information on their profile. And when the title comes in, it points us to new titles that they might have that aren't necessarily even up to date on the website. So what's next? As we roll this out, we're actually, as a part of this, we're just announcing it. We've been in beta, stealth for a year, working with Stanford, working with Wharton, working with the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and running it, as they say, through a lot of events so far. So we're building up a good data source. And from that data source, we'll be able to say, okay, here's the profile of a person who actually attended your event. Here's a set of people who have a similar profile for your next event. And here's how so here's people you should reach out to. We also have the ability to rate the speakers, and so we'll have a library of speakers across a wide amount of events that will have ratings against them. And so we'll have a marketplace for finding good speakers. And then as we start to update all of the records, we think that the events can start being used as networks that are more lasting than just the time that you're there. So if you were to meet people at an event and you were to say, I've met these people and those people have a change in position, well, you'd like to get notified about that. Or if you're interested in companies and say, did somebody I meet at this, let me know when somebody I met actually now goes and works there. So treating these events as alumni opportunities as well to allow event organizers to maintain longer relationships with their customers. And that's what we're doing.
Great, that's wonderful.
Shoot across the line.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Are we able to walk past this water bottle? Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to stay closer to the podium just to hopefully block some of the wind. I don't know if anyone else is in the tundra as well. So, I am Danny Zadoff, co-founder and managing partner of Nutritionix. I grew up here in Miami, so coincidentally, the last time I was in this building was 15 years ago for my senior prom.
All right.
This is extremely awkward, but good as well.
Just like this.
Yeah, exactly. When we started the company in 2010, we had a very different focus. It was mostly around building interactive nutrition tools for restaurants. So we would build nutrition calculators, anything that would help the consumer see the information. But we started realizing over building these tools is that the restaurants were giving us the direct data of restaurant nutrition information, and app developers were starting to request this information for their apps, whether it was a weight tracking app or diet loss, anything like that. So as we started pulling all of our data together, we realized CPG, consumer packaged goods, was a huge area that we still hadn't gathered information on, and started putting together the world's largest and most accurate nutrition database. We licensed this information out through our API to different types of app developers, and through the different tools that we provide, we keep on curating the information and building it to have as much as possible. So who uses this information? With the app developers, we usually see it's in weight loss, in disease management. Just to dive into a couple of these different case studies, in the disease management side, there are many apps out there that are for diabetes management. So if a consumer is trying to find what they're eating and how much insulin they need to pump, one of the apps that we work with actually integrates directly with the insulin pump, and they can search a food in our database, it returns the nutritional content, and tells the glucometer exactly how much should be pumped and keeps them in check. It also varies to wearables like Fitbit, where instead of them having to develop their own application, their own database and aggregate all the information, they can just very quickly plug and play through our API, or some of our customers even do a bulk CSV data dump of all of our data to get everything quickly. It's also on the research and health side with health institutions that license the information for studies or to help their registered dietitians inside the hospitals track their patients' foods. Now, the reason that this is all very important is the different types of changes that we're seeing in the environment. Right now with the FDA and part of Obamacare, there's a part that says any restaurant chain with more than 20 locations will need to start showing calories on the menu boards and provide a full breakdown of the nutrition information upon customer request. So as we're seeing these changes, many brands have offered up this information in the stores, even in the ones that aren't in New York or Washington, California, because they want to be ahead of this curve. So as this additional information is coming out, we've already been able to gather 625 restaurant chains that have the nutrition information and expect this to grow to over 1,500 by the end of next year. There's also the changes to the nutrition label that everyone knows. Here's the proposed new look of the nutrition label that will be coming out in 2015. And with all these new changes, consumers are becoming much more intelligent about it. In the keynote that we heard earlier about quinoa becoming something much bigger, you're seeing a lot more health focus in society. And then with technology, you see HealthKit, Google Fit, different platforms that are just getting this information to consumers faster. So the data itself, here's the breakdown of how much data is coming from each place. The farthest one on the right is from the USDA's database, where we work with them to help curate this information and provide that one source of data. And most app developers that use any type of food, like that diabetes management one I mentioned earlier, they were limited to just the 9,000 foods that people are eating. As we all know, people probably eat more diverse things, and that's where our database of almost 400,000 foods allows them to get all of that quickly. So the process of getting this information is extremely difficult because everywhere you look, it's in a different format. Whether it's their websites, the actual packaging, we found a way to bring it all together and make it as simple as possible of getting it directly from the source and always verified information. So the main difference of what we try to do with our data is that we put a timestamp on every piece of food, so it can only live in our database for up to 12 months before it expires, kind of like what the gentleman were mentioning of knowing when they have to go out to get that new information. And we don't allow consumers to just enter this information and saying, oh, I ate this, let me say what it is, because usually they're wrong, or sometimes they may have just pressed the wrong button. So what we did is that for all the data in our database, we created an algorithm called Nutritionix. And what it does is it looks for impossible inconsistencies in the nutrition information so that we can find the errors even before the manufacturers do. So let's say our database pulls up an error on Trader Joe's dark chocolate. An impossible inconsistency is that total carbohydrates is made up of fiber and sugar in addition to other things. So the sum of those two cannot possibly exceed total carbs. In this example, you see that the manufacturer at some point didn't realize this. So not only are we trying to aggregate all the information, but we're trying to make it better. So we can now reach out to Trader Joe's and let them know the information you're displaying is incorrect, and a consumer or a diabetic could very easily have a health risk based on the information that you're publishing.
Do you do that now? I mean, did you reach out to these guys, or can you tell us about a story like that when you pinged a manufacturer?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite calls. It is the easiest way for a cold call.
Your favorite call, yeah.
As opposed to your normal cold call when you're asking for something, here we're offering something that they're making a very public mistake. And I pick Trader Joe's as one of the bigger names that people may recognize, but all throughout our 400,000 items, and actually just to the consumer package side, so the 250,000, over 2,000 have been flagged with these types of errors. So it's actually much more common because the data comes straight to a graphic designer that just punches it in, and now it's held in many databases without this type of curation. So how do we get this data? It's either the packaging itself. I'll stick with the order. What I mentioned in the very beginning of the restaurant chains that we publish their information, they're actually giving us the data directly into our database. So different manufacturers, restaurant brands that we provide these tools give us their information. Other ones on their website, they have PDFs, and we have a team that scrapes the information, curates it, and adds it. The third is our grocery agents. So we developed a proprietary app and send agents to different grocery stores where they scan the barcode of a food, actually take a picture of the front of the package, nutrition label, ingredient statement, and through dual data entry, 2 different people transcribe the data, and if it makes sense, it gets added to our database. We also have our photo transcription API, which what this does is Fitbit, for example, just launched this tool with us, where if a customer tries to scan a food and it's not in the database, prompts them to take those 3 pictures for us, still comes into our system where we check to make sure the UPC is actually for that food, get all of the information in, and pass it through our algorithm to be added in. Now, some of the interesting plays of going forward that we're trying to figure out and would love your feedback on is what to do. Yes?
So, how are you actually collecting this? Is this manually, or do you have a team of people that are going out?
Great question. So we hire contractors around the country. So based on the UPC data through our API, we can tell when certain UPCs are being requested that we don't have yet. We then use our master UPC list to figure out which chains they are. For example, Nob Hill Foods came up recently in the Bay Area, so we deployed a team out there, send them into the stores with the app, and they awkwardly go shelf by shelf taking pictures of everything, and we add it to the database. Or we reach out to the brand to put it in.
The websites, though, are you using calling capabilities, or how are you actually going to the websites and getting the data?
We have a team of dietetic interns that actually look into the information for the brands, but the key part is that it's an extremely disorganized industry. We can even call a manufacturer with the exact UPC of the food and the name, and they can't give us the nutrition information because they don't have a system in place to easily manage it or see what it should be. So the most sure way for us is to actually get that package in hand to see what it would be. And just as the next steps of what we're looking at is what to do with all this data that we're getting. We know what people are searching for, what they're actually selecting to add to their meal logs. So here you see the list of the top 10 foods eaten by men in the last 30 days. So starting in the top left corner, going down, and then over. And these are theoretically health-conscious people that are using these apps. So it's seeing, what do we do with this data? Do we take it and then try to sell it to the manufacturers to let them know which of their products are more popular? Do we sell it to competitors to let them know in the Greek yogurt space what is the most popular? Is it this certain nutritional attribute that is driving more sales than others? And that's the big part of a startup, trying to figure out where we monetize our database. Right now the focus is licensing the data so that an app developer can launch very easily and economically. But with all this data, what can we do? Thank you guys very much.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, we have still time for some questions. What do you think, Roxanne? I don't want to. Okay, you started a little late there. So great job, excellent guys, excellent job there, wonderful stuff. Let me kind of go down the row here. So Bruce, yeah, tell us about last Tuesday. So how do you gear up for that? Right, big shift. The whole database is going to change. I mean, do you have any anecdotes around that, just operationally?
Just experience, I think. I mean, we've been doing this for 30 years,
Okay.
So we've got a pretty refined process. But I mean, chaos is good for business. So Tuesday was a good day for us.
So how quick are you ready? I mean, how quick does that data get updated?
We have federal and state. There's 7,600 state legislators. We'll have everything updated in 2 weeks.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell us about this. I'm really interested in this conversation where you were going to go down and convince that client to not put it in Salesforce, and you had that little spin around. Tell us about that.
One of my major prospects, and typically. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so typically we'd be selling data into a database structure. This client was looking to use our data and had it on a trial basis. And they came and said they were going to put it into Salesforce. And I just thought that was a disaster. I was a little naive at the time. This was 6 years ago. And we went down and took a look at what they built using our raw data into Salesforce. And, it's compelling. So you think about Salesforce as being a sales tool. Well, in my world, selling an issue or an idea to a state legislator is no different than selling a computer or a muffler. The process is the same. You've got to identify them. You've got to nurture the relationship. You've got to feed them the information. Then you've got to close the deal. The deal is either they vote or don't vote for a particular piece of legislation. So it's a natural fit. It's a natural fit. And it's huge to be able to leverage all of that infrastructure, all that cloud infrastructure, to be able to augment your data. One of the greatest examples was we've been struggling for months about what we were going to do about a mobile app. Okay, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 to develop a mobile app. Salesforce announces they came out with Salesforce One, which is a free mobile app to all Salesforce users. So my problem. Right, my problem went away. Thank you, Salesforce.
Right. No, that's how it should go. Because do you have any of your own software that you license at all at this point, or is it all just data feeds?
I mean, I keep saying we're a data company, but when you start talking about building apps and all of that stuff, the lines get very blurred. But we like to focus on simple, and we like to focus on feeding data into existing CRMs and feeding data into existing structures, as opposed to being a software or a solutions provider. So,
Right.
And so for example, in the Salesforce world, we use integrators. We don't integrate our product. We use so we have a large client coming to us. They would have an integrator that would help them do the install and would do all the customization. We want to stay away from all that customization work. Yeah.
We would just stick on the content, make sure the content's as good as it can be, and then
license the data, get the renewal, and keep going.
One of my favorite models, in case you're wondering. Put your content into the bloodstream, let everybody else do all the rest of that work, because that's critical. Kreg, great stuff there too. I have to just mention this little note in all your bios that you were related somehow to an Academy Award winning effort. Did you want to talk about that just a little bit to elaborate that? So sure.
I started life as a sound designer and worked on some sound design with a bunch of animators for a student Academy Award, student Emmy, and then I worked on a documentary film about India and the poverty there. And that won Audience Choice Award for an HBO documentary.
Oh, wow. So you read EGOT here, I guess. With this, a MEGOT, actually. That's what you're going to get. Oh, wonderful. So, you talked about just not scraping, and Dan, you mentioned this too, no scraping and crowdsourcing. I find that somewhat of a refreshing approach, because there was a great period when people were just, let's just scrape it and that's where it is. Just talk about that if you would, and Dan, if you would as well. Just why not scrape? What have you found about those dynamics?
So event content is going to lead into a lot of problems if you're scraping. Okay, you could be talking about Super Bowl 2 years ago, and the scraper would crawl that and think that it's an upcoming event and put it in the system. And we have hundreds of thousands of examples of our competitors that just scrape content of an event that's not even happening. And they try to make associations between venues and performers, and they would make guesses wrong all day long. So instead, what we decided as a construct is, let's build a robot suit, and put a human inside that robot suit, giving the superpower of the tools that can help bring things to their awareness, but at the end of the day, it's the human intelligence that makes the right decisions.
No, that's great. You have that governance piece on there too. So, Dan, you were saying, I'm not skipping you on purpose, Sean. I promise. The whole feedback thing just put me off there.
What's interesting is that a lot of the companies that we try to gather information from do a very poor job of managing their website. So the PDFs that cover the nutrition information, they forget to take them down once they've put up a new one. So they'll have several years worth of PDFs where if you Google Pizza Hut allergens, the first result is their page from 2007. So if it isn't an intelligent system that's scraping, you can very easily make a huge mistake.
So just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's right? Is that it?
Potentially that is correct.
Good, that's great. John, so this was interesting too, just this LinkedIn sort of, and I've noticed this when I try and call on people who are very high level. You find a LinkedIn page with the great silhouette and, maybe 2 lines, and they obviously don't want to touch it. So just if you could tell us a little bit more about how you really kind of validated that.
Well, so we don't know exactly why it is, but we took we took about 10,000 folks that had used, that were at our events, and we manually checked their LinkedIn accounts. Did they have one? Did they not have one? And we just did straight, good old-fashioned, legwork on it. And, and then it was, once you got that first, they don't have one at all, then it was, okay, well, when was the last update? And that's when we figured out that they're just not using it. Now there's the question that everybody asks, well, is that just demographics? Because the people we're talking about tend to be older, and so maybe they just don't use LinkedIn. I think that's a part of it. I think it's also an industry thing. I think people in tech tend to use it more. But I think the biggest part is the higher you get up in the food chain, the less valuable LinkedIn is for you. What you've got is people asking you for things, but who can't offer you very much.
Right.
And so, so aside from essentially recruiting, so being a figurehead and that, there's not a lot of value for the higher level people to be on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. But they still do need to talk to each other. There's still, there's still a value for them to be networking with each other in a way that doesn't require having to fly to Miami. But I'll take the trip.
That's it. No, that's simple. Your line too, obviously, about cool versus creepy, and just that simple notion of just putting the source line on there and taking care of it. That would just alleviate all sorts of concerns, I think. So
we've had not a single complaint. Every one of the hosts, before they use it, has said, "Aren't people going to be freaked out about this?" And not a one of them has received.
Well, if I look at it and say my source is my annual report, it's what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Right. So. Wonderful. Have you said you baited this? Can you talk about, were there any events where this was active? Some of the...
Sure, we did Stanford Directors College. We've done, we just did one in Canada, also with Stanford. That's the other thing, is everybody who's used it has wanted to use it for their subsequent events, which is a nice validation. The New York Stock Exchange has the corporate board member division, and so they use it. It's really... my first question when we started on this was, how big is the market? How many of these types of events are there really? Well, it turns out that there's thousands and thousands of these events. They're happening just for executives. They're happening all the time. And so, really just the first, few dozen that we've done with the, thousands of people that have gone through have really validated, I think, the concept that people do want them. We have 70% of the people actually log in because they just get an email. Right? They just say, hey, we're offering this. So 70% of people log in. They use it multiple times. The usage is exactly as you'd expect when they first get the email, big usage. then it drops off, right before the event, it spikes up, and then during the event, it spikes up, and then after the event, it goes down. And so that's really the big challenge, is how do you maintain that connection after the event is over.
Yeah. Greg, do you do entertainment events? Do you do any B2B events, or?
There's business conferences and things like that, but typically they're open to the public, kind of a walk-in forum, whereas his are more registered, but I think there was a similar.
But I mean, tracking that kind of event, or they tend to be. I'm trying to connect you guys.
Yeah.
Obviously,
one of the constructs.
I'll be on your board, so.
I think there's a lot of value to both platforms in the sense that I think we both think about how do you add value before, during, and after the event, and that's exactly where we are for local events, but they're not necessarily registered events, right? They're not business conferences.
Right.
Well, from a data perspective, we have the same problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
You would think that each company, that there would be some sort of standard around how to present your board members or your executives on a website. Every single one of them is different. We're just, and they're human beings, and human beings, anything organic defies any algorithm. So you have to find a way to automate as much as you can, but you got to remember you're going to be mistaken. You got to put it in front of a human being in a robot suit. I like that. I'm going to steal that thing.
Yeah, this is good. There's a lot of good stuff.
I'm going to steal the cool versus creepy.
There you go. It's good trade. But we see it all the time where I was looking at a site the other day where the same person was listed 3 different times on the same company site with 3 different titles and 3 different biographies, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, and it was all current. So to expect an algorithm to understand that.
What happened there? Not to get that granular.
I just made a call.
So, skipping way over. So, Dan, do you have a UPC database?
We do as well.
So, you have a UPC database?
Yes, we built it.
You built it yourself?
Yes.
Let's talk later. I mean, there are very few sources of that are really any good.
And that's the interesting part.
It's really,
Do you try to license that and kind of step away from your main model, or just use it for the other side? And it's one of those questions when you have too many channels or too many potential revenue streams of not getting too distracted. But then again, like you said, there aren't too many out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real core asset there. So I got a bunch of other questions, but I want to open it up here if anybody's got questions in the group. Yeah, Russell, always first in hand, always the same hands with Russell.
First, I'm wondering, you're tying your data so closely to Salesforce now. Does that put you in a position of having to sell Salesforce too, or what are the pros and cons?
That's a good question. The question was, having tied the data so closely to Salesforce, does it put us in a position where we have to sell Salesforce in addition to the data? And my simple solution is no. We don't sell to anyone who doesn't already have Salesforce. So we're cherry picking people who already have Salesforce. So ironically, we had to get that list from someone other than Salesforce because being an ISV partner and giving them 15% off the top doesn't really get you any rights or privileges. So what we typically will do is we have a government affairs database. So we'll go out and pull Salesforce users, match that against our government affairs database, and identify those organizations that are doing government affairs and currently somewhere within the enterprise are using Salesforce, and we'll start looking under those rocks. But I instruct my sales guys to completely stay away from anybody who isn't currently using Salesforce. That's a complicated close.
And you're selling software.
Our close cycles are already, 6 to 9 months. Adding that would add probably another 12 months onto it, and I probably won't keep my sales guys that long. So.
We had a question in the back there too. Probably time for one more. Did we?
I had the same question.
Yes, sir.
Mine's for Bruce. In the Salesforce integration, do you have to use a certain level, like enterprise or something like that, to use your system working?
It's a great question. Yeah, you have to use the enterprise level. So at the lower levels, you can't engage the campaigns and the relationships that you need in Salesforce. So the enterprise level is a minimum requirement for our application to work. It's a good question.
Wonderful. I think that's it. We move on? Yeah, because we can. Russell, you have another. It's your show, man, so whatever you want to do.
Just a quick question for Danny. If I remember correctly, you've got that widget that goes on the restaurant websites or the manufacturer's website, so you are effectively taking data they give you and selling it back to them.
Effectively, yes. So
Great business
Another favorite business model.
to sell publishing tools to the actual people that are providing the data and then reselling back the data of theirs and their competitors combined. So a nice circle.
Yeah, well, to a great extent. I mean, to some extent, all of you are going to clients and you're replacing something that they're trying to do on their own, which is this kind of outsource approach. And when you get to the data side, it gets a little more personal, at least in my experience. So, anyway, I want to thank all you gentlemen. Excellent job. I appreciate your coming. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.